So I almost always begin with something funny, random, bizarre, lightens the atmosphere, wins me some quick and easy sermon points. It wakes you all up, and oftentimes it's the only thing you remember the next year. There's two reasons I'm not going to do that. One is because I peaked on Rosh Hashanah day 2. I have to next time think about it more carefully because my partner in crime over here, Georgie, outdid all of us as she, at the culmination of the joke, is swearing. Nothing cuter than a 90-year-old booby swearing as part of the sermon. So there's nowhere to go from there but downhill. The real reason I'm not telling a joke is because what I'm going to share with you is the most difficult, painful thing I can share with you personally and professionally. I made an announcement that there was a heavy topic earlier, so again, be forewarned, but it's an important topic. It's important to me, and you'll see, I think soon, it's important to all of us here. I've shared bits and pieces with you. It's been many years since I've spoken about it, really. I've never shared the entirety or most of the story, but I'm going to do so tonight, and there's a reason why. When I was 15 years old, my paternal grandmother, my father's mother, committed suicide. She had been battling depression for many, many years, decades in fact, and it was a different world. It was a different time. She had electroshock therapy to the point where she was only a shell of her former vibrant self. By the time I really got to know her when I was about 15, she was, in many ways, she was already gone. She lived in a different world. Back then, you didn't talk about suicide, you didn't talk about depression. This wasn't her first attempt, by the way. It was her first successful attempt, but she had been struggling for many decades, and it wasn't something you spoke about. Certainly wasn't something you spoke about in my home, in my family. We didn't talk about her depression, and then it ended. In a moment, her suffering, I imagine, went away, but in that very moment, my family's suffering only began. We all have pivotal moments in our lives, personal lives, family lives, community lives, when everything can shift, sometimes for the good, in this case, for the bad. It took my family into a quick descent into hell. When this was happening, after she killed herself, my grandfather had found out. I'm not sure if he was in the house or not when she took her life, but he was the first to find her. And in a moment of panic, I guess I can't imagine the shock, but he called my father instead of calling 911. I always wonder what would have happened if he would have called 911, but that wasn't how it worked out. My father was the second to arrive on the scene to find his dead mother. And the pain, the anguish, the sorrow, the guilt, the horror never left my dad. He carried it with him the rest of his life, what he saw, what he experienced there. I didn't get there right away. I was getting home from school that day. I had a learner's permit, 15 years old, you can drive in Nebraska. I came home, my mom told me what happened, and against her better wishes, I jumped in the car, raced across town, and I was the fourth one on the scene. The paramedics were just packing up and leaving. My dad must have been holding it together because the moment he saw me, something in him primal unleashed. It was 25 years ago, and I remember it like it was yesterday. He came running at me, and he grabbed me as tight as I've ever been hugged, and he held me close. My face was in the nape of his neck, and he was holding onto my hair, and he was just screaming this primal sound that I can't get out of my mind. I can still hear it like it was that very day. Why? He kept screaming over and over again. I don't know how long it lasted, but I knew something profound had been lost. Of course, my grandmother and her suicide was a great loss, but I knew in that moment that something in my father had also been lost, as well as my grandfather. My grandfather tried to resume a normal life. He did the best he could with what he had, but ultimately, he never really got over that day. He was always kind of a shadow of his former self. And in many ways, he died with my grandmother on that day. My father's demise was a much slower descent. My father went back to his routines, to his work, to his life. Like many people I see in the aftermath of loss, right? Everything is fine. He just had to get back to the busyness of raising a family, of building a business, of providing for that family. And everything was fine, at least it seemed to a teenager and then into my early 20s. It was fine until it wasn't. Over the next decade, my father sabotaged his business. He threw away friendships, pulled away from community, severed lifelong ties from other friends, and ultimately he threw away his marriage to my mother. All the while I looked on, I tried to reason with him. I was now in my 20s. I was trying to talk to him as an adult, to communicate with him, but that's not what he did. That's not what that side of the family did. He resisted the communication. Every time I wanted to talk about suicide or the darkness, the grief, it just caused a wedge that grew further and further between me and my father. He decided that he needed to start a new life, and he was going to move from Omaha, where he was living, to Detroit, where he spent the final years of his life. And I just argued with him, saying, you're just going to take your baggage with you and unpack it somewhere else. Why don't you deal with it and confront it? But he wouldn't have any of it. So I decided to make him a CD. And I put on that CD one song, and I wrote out the lyrics, and I said, just promise me on your drive from Omaha to Detroit, you'll listen to this song over and over again. It's a song that almost everybody here knows, Simon and Garfunkel's The Sound of Silence. And in it I wrote, fools said I, or they wrote, and I repeated it, fools said I, you do not know. Silence like a cancer grows. Hear my words pop that I might teach you. Take my arms, Dad, that I might reach you. But my words like silent raindrops fell and echoed into the wells of silence. And my words did. They echoed into the wells of silence, and silence like cancer grew from my father. Over 2 decades of this silence, this cancerous silence eroding his life, on October 17th, 2006, as many of you probably remember, the cancerous silence became too much for my father, and on that day, he took his own life. It was ironically Cantor Emil who was tasked with breaking the news to me. He was in this very room where the Bima used to be over there. And Cantor Emil, it's ironic because Cantor Emil was my cantor growing up. Cantor Emil officiated at my grandmother's funeral. Cantor Emil became friends with my grandfather after her funeral, and he went to Minyan every day. And Cantor Emil knew my father. And so he told me my father took his life, and I don't remember anything other than that. And then screaming out this like inheritance that I had been giving. Why? I just remember screaming as if my father had prepared me or taught me 20 years prior, 20 years earlier, even though it was thousands of miles away. In many ways, I was standing in the exact same spot as my father. It was the same age as my father when his mother took her life. I was just facing the exact same tragedy as my father. I was facing the same responsibilities in life as a husband, as a father. I was facing now the exact same choices as my dad. And that's why I'm sharing this with you today. Why am I sharing it with you? Not because I miss my dad. I do. I miss him. There hasn't been one single day in 7 years that I haven't thought about my dad. But that's not why I'm sharing this with you. It's not to process my grief. I still grieve for my father, but I processed my grief years ago. I'm sharing this with you because this affects you. It affects all of us. It affects us as a country. It affects us as a community. It affects us as families, and it affects us as individuals. Why? Because in the 25 years since my grandmother killed herself, and in the 7 years since my father took his life, suicide has only gotten worse, epidemically worse. I don't know if you realize this, contrary to what the evening news might have you believe, but America is a less violent place in almost every measurable way. Americans are doing less violence to other people, but they're doing more and more violence, self-harm to themselves. Since 1999, suicide has grown every single year. Every year we set new records in this country with people taking their lives. This past year, 30,000 Americans killed themselves. It's a shocking statistic. This year, supposedly, we're on track for 40,000 Americans who will take their lives. The CDC said this is not only a new record, but now we're in a whole new ballgame. Suicide is now the leading cause of injury death. What does that mean? Suicide this past year outpaced deaths on the road. More Americans now die of suicide than in car accidents. More of us die by suicide than car accidents. Suicide now outpaces homicides 2-1. Suicide took more lives last year than war. Suicide in this country took more lives than natural disasters. In this country, suicides took more lives last year than war, than natural disasters, and than homicides combined. We oftentimes think of this as a teen problem, a teen disease, and it is. Suicide is the third leading cause of death among teenagers, but did you know it's the first cause of death for gay teenagers or teenagers that are bullied? I just heard about another teen who was bullied and just took their own life. I guess it was in the Boston Globe today. This is an epidemic, and it is only growing, and it is getting simply unbearable. It is getting worse, and it's not just a teen issue. Middle-aged people now are killing themselves at numbers never before seen, those between 20 and 54. The statistics on it are shocking. Why? Because now, if you're in that age group, 20 to 54, it is the leading cause of death, passing cancer and heart disease for that age group. It's a shocking realization. But it's not just middle-agers that are killing themselves. Baby boomers, 50, 60, 70-year-olds. This is where the CDC says there's been the biggest jump. There's been a twofold multiply in people of this age group taking their lives. And seniors are still have the highest rates of any of the groups. It's a staggering reality that this epidemic is on the rise. And in the military, I bet you didn't know this. I didn't know this. 2012 was the deadliest year to be in our military in regards to suicide. Did you know that more veterans now kill themselves than ever before? You know what the average is? It's 22 deaths a day. That's one U.S. veteran killing themselves every 65 minutes. And brace yourselves for this. Last year, our troops on active duty, more of them were killed by themselves than by the enemy. More of our soldiers last year were killed by their hand than by the hand of the enemy. I couldn't believe that when I read it. If this many soldiers were being killed by the enemy, we'd be outraged. We'd start a campaign to save our troops. We would picket, we'd march, we'd put ribbons on things, we'd do anything. How come there are no campaigns? We have campaigns against drunk driving. We have campaigns against smoking, we have a war on drugs. We have campaigns against STDs and AIDS, and we have solicitations for funding for cancer research and heart disease. How many walks have we been on for breast cancer? How many resources did we generously give last year after tragedy or terror struck? These are all worthy causes. Don't get me wrong. We should continue to fund them. We should continue to educate about them. We should keep on fighting for them or against them. But what about suicide? Why aren't we outraged? Why aren't we even talking about it? Why is it that almost nobody I speak to knows about this issue? And it's hard to miss this issue because in the New York Times this past spring, week after week, there was article after article about the rising rates of suicide. In fact, I got most of my information from the cover story of Newsweek magazine just about 2 months ago. And yet we don't talk about it. Or maybe it's that we don't want to talk about it, or we don't want to know about it, or we can't hear it, or it's too terrifying or horrifying or baffling. And it is. It is baffling. We don't know why people kill themselves. There is no one definitive reason. It is not simply because of economic hardship. That factors in. It's not because of gun proliferation. Did you know last year the number one weapon of choice with suicides was medication, prescription medication, right? So all of these things add up. All of these things contribute, but there isn't one factor. It's not because terrorism is on the rise. It's not because of changing rates of psychological depression and so many other factors that are real and do add up and do factor in. But there is only one common thread that I've been able to find in my studies, and I've only seen in my experience, that cuts socio-economic, religious, cultural, geographical, gender divides. And what is that one common denominator? It was said best in a New York Times article called All the Lonely People. It was quoting University of Virginia sociologist Brad Wilcox, who said, "There's a strong link between suicide and weakened social ties. People, especially men, become more likely to kill themselves when they get disconnected from society's core institutions like marriage, community, friendships, religion. Study after study, article after article tells us exactly what the Torah told us thousands of years ago. What is one of the first things God says to Adam? Lo tov heodot adam levado. It is lo tov. It is not good. It is destructive. It is even deadly for a person to be levado. What is levado? Levado is often translated as alone, but it's not alone. It's lonely. You can be alone and not be lonely. But you can be surrounded by people and be levado, be lonely. You can be in a marriage and be levado. You can be in a family and be levado, in a community and be lonely, right? It's about being levado. This is the great danger, says God in the Torah to Adam. This is the great danger still in the society we live. I gave a talk on Erev Rosh Hashanah about being a workaholic and the early workaholics. Moses was one of the first early workaholics. He was single-handedly trying to save the Israelites. He was preacher, he was teacher, he was pastor, CEO, he was military general, he was judge, he was jury. He tried to do it all and to be it all. But that's not Moses' real problem. What's the real problem? Not just that he takes it all on, but that he takes it on alone. Not just that he tries to do it all, but that he tries to do it all alone. Not just that he faces so many of life's battles, but he faces them alone. He's the one who invented this mantra, which we now kind of worship in Hollywood, and this macho image of go it alone. That was Moses' mantra. And his father-in-law, Yitro, a wise Midianite priest, saw that this is lo tov. This is not good, this go-it-alone mentality. So what does his father-in-law say to Moses? This thing you are doing, Moses, is lo tov. The same words God used. It's lo tov. It's not good to try and do it all. It's not good to try and be it all, but above all else, it is dangerous, and it is destructive, and it is even deadly to go this hard for this long, to go it alone. If you do it, if you go it alone indefinitely, you'll burn up, you'll burn out, and you might even end up dead. But Moses doesn't listen. Why? Because he's a gever, as we say in Hebrew. He's a warrior. He's a Marine. Did you know the Marines had the highest rates of suicide last year in the military? But that's what Moses is going to do. He's going to go it alone. And you know what happens to Moses? Livado, loneliness, turns into isolation, turns into depression, turns into darkness, turns the mighty Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu, brings him to the brink. It brings him to his knees in a fit of desperation. At the low point in his life, he turns to God and says, God, I cannot carry this entire people alone. It's too hard for me. Ve'im kacha at osali hargeni na. If this is how it has to be, God, if life is this difficult, if life is this livado, lonely, then I'd rather be dead than be livado. I'd rather take my life than be this lonely, than be alone. No matter who you are, no matter how tough you are, how strong you are, how resilient you might be, go it alone for long enough, remain in your livado, in your loneliness indefinitely, and you'll end up depressed, and you'll end up distraught, and you'll end up in the darkness, and you might even end up like Moses, or my grandmother, or my father, choosing death over life. And that's why I'm standing here today, to tell you about what happened 7 years ago to me at my father's graveside, at his funeral when I read his eulogy. Because I made a choice, coming back to that choice that he handed me. I made a choice. I made a decision. On the night of Kol Nidre, what I made was a vow. What did I vow? I made 3 vows, and I began with these words, which I didn't know at the time will be the opening words for my son's bar mitzvah in 2 years. Ha'azinu hashamayim va'adrana v'tishma ha'aretz v'im mefi. Hear me, God. Listen to me. Listen to me now. Right? And I said the following. My first vow is this. I vow that my family is out of the suicide business. I vowed to my wife then and there, I will never do this to you. I vowed to my children, my son here's tonight, I would never, ever leave you. I would never choose death over life. I would never choose death over you. That much you can be certain of. I vowed at that moment to not make the same choices as my grandmother, to never make the same choice as my father, and to never allow anybody in my circle, inner circle, outer circle, anywhere, to ever believe that suicide is a viable option. It's not a viable choice. Our Torah says for a reason, uvacharta b'chayim, choose life. To choose life, I vow, to only choose life, and to always choose life. Tonight is Kol Nidre. Tonight is not about me and my vows. Tonight is about us and our vows. And our vows need to begin right here, right now. Uvacharta b'chayim, choosing life, no matter who you are. Whether you're here with us tonight, or whether you're joining us on our showcast or on our sagecast, or whether you're listening to us at a later point or watching us on a later date, no matter how dark your life might be, no matter how lonely you might feel, no matter how bad it might seem, uvacharta b'chayim, I vow to choose life. Say it with me. I vow to choose life. Uvacharta b'chayim. I vow to only choose life. Say it with me. I vow to only choose life. Uvacharta b'chayim. I vow to always choose life. Say it with me. I vow to always choose life. And on that day, I made a second vow. I said, Lo hametim dahalel yah lo kol yordei duma. God, the dead cannot praise you, and neither can those who go to their grave in silence. I made a vow that I would not go to my grave in silence. Silence like a cancer grows, and I vowed I would never be silent, not on this issue and not on any issue when lives hang in the balance. So tonight on Kol Nidre, not my night of vows, but our night of vows, we must all vow to speak up. So say it with me, I vow to speak up. Tonight we must all say, I vow to speak out. So say it with me, I vow to speak out. Tonight on Kol Nidre, we must all vow to shatter the silence. So say it with me, I vow to shatter the silence enshrouding depression and darkness and death and suicide. And my third and final vow at my father's graveside, I vowed to redeem my father's tragic voices, to redeem him by transforming his darkness into somebody else's light, to transform my family's curses into some other family's blessings, to transform my tragedy into somebody else's possibility, to redeem my father, through reaching out to my family, to my friends, to my congregation, to my community, to anyone and everyone who is lost in life's livado. That was my vow, to redeem him through fulfilling the mitzvah, the number one mitzvah of our Torah. The number one mitzvah is not keep Shabbos. The number one mitzvah is not keep kosher. The number one mitzvah is not daven, pray 3 times a day. The number one mitzvah, repeated more than any other mitzvah, 36 times, is zachor, remember. Remember and reach out to the stranger in need. Remember and reach out to the orphan at any age who's lonely or alone. Remember and reach out to the widow or to the widower who has just lost their loved one and is lost in life's livado. Remember and reach out to friends who are battling depression. Remember and reach out to colleagues who are battling cancer. Remember and reach out to neighbors who are shut-ins and have been forgotten. Remember and reach out to acquaintances or anybody who's in life's livado. Tonight on Kol Nidre is not my vows, it's our vows. As a country, we need to make new vows. And as a community, and as a congregation, and as families, and as individuals, it's time for us to vow to open our hearts. So say it with me, I vow to open my heart. Tonight on Kol Nidre, we must vow to open our hand. So say it with me, I vow to open my hand. Tonight on Kol Nidre, we must vow to reach out to those in need. So say it with me, I vow to reach out to those in need, to anyone lost in the darkness, to anybody drowning in despair, to everyone suffering in loneliness and isolation. Tonight on Kol Nidre, we must vow, not just through speaking these words, but we must vow through singing these words, living these words out this year, but anchoring them in with song, a song not about silence and sorrow, but a song about hope and hopefulness. This is a vow that could have saved my grandmother, a vow that would have saved my dad, a vow that might save 40,000 would-be suicide victims this coming year, a vow that maybe, just maybe, will save one individual, one soul. And our rabbis say saving a soul is like saving the entire world. The vow goes like this: lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on. For it won't be long till I'm going to need somebody to lean on, till you're going to need somebody to lean on, till we're going to need somebody to lean on. So join me as we vow to end loneliness, and join me as we vow to choose life this year and inspire others, uvacharta b'chayim, to choose life, to always choose life, to only choose life. L'chaim tovim u'l'shalom. May this be a long and good life as you join in, as we sing our vow. If you've been touched by suicide, if you've lost a loved one to suicide, friend, suicide, acquaintance, you know somebody, at any point feel free to rise and know that you're not alone as we all choose life together and we support each other through the darkness. Uvacharta b'chayim. choose life. And please join us.
Sometimes in our lives, we all have pain, we all have sorrow, but if we are wise, we know that there's always tomorrow. Lean on me when you're not
Words are on your sheets if you want to see them.
and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. Please swallow your pride if I have things you need to borrow, for no one can fill those of your needs that you won't let show me. Just call on me, brother, when you need a hand. We all need somebody to lean on.
Please don't let anybody stand alone. We're all in this together. Put your arm around the person.
We all need somebody.
We are brothers and sisters to lean on each other.
When you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. If there is a load you have to bear that you can't carry, I'm right up the road. I'll share your load if you just call me. You just call on me, brother, when you need a hand. We all need somebody to lean on. I just might have a problem that you'd understand. We all need somebody to lean on. Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on,
For it won't be long till I'm gonna need
somebody to lean on.
Thank you to Rachel Baker, to Gabby Goldwasser, and to Livia Alperin for bringing that to life, to embodying the essence of that song, which is life, choosing life, uvacharta b'chaim, always choosing life.